Hi, I'm Richard Costello, and thank you for tuning into this episode of the Castler podcast. Today I'm joined by Pete Osborne, Professor of Advanced Manufacturing at the University of Sheffield AMRC and Director at Innovation Launchpad Network Plus. Pete, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Richard, and good morning, everyone.
Great. So in this episode, we're going to be covering what is the University of Sheffield AMRC and the AMRC's role in implementing the UK's new industrial strategy. But first, I thought it would be great to give listeners a bit more context about who you are and your career and work to date.
Yeah, thanks. So my name's obviously Pete Osborne. I've worked at the AMRC for nearly 18 years now. But originally I grew up in Norfolk and came to Sheffield to study engineering. And I guess like many people, I've never left. I've been captured by the city and all of its benefits. And really, I got a little bit lucky and found my ideal place to work here at the AMRC.
Great. And so diving into the first section then about the AMRC. So I guess firstly, the University of Sheffield AMRC, what's the origin story? How did it come about originally?
Yeah, so we will have been around for 25 years, and really it came about. So the AMRC is an applied research centre, and it came about because Keith Ridgway, who was a professor here at the University of Sheffield, was doing some applied manufacturing research with local company Technicut. They were developing a new cutting tool solution, and Adrian Allen, who was the commercial director at Technicut at the time, was looking to try and optimize that solution so that it could be sold into industry. And they got quite a long way along with that. And Adrian went out to talk to Boeing, amongst other companies, about them using the tools. Boeing said to them, it's really great, but every tooling company comes to us each year and tells us they've got the latest, greatest tools. How do we trust you? Wouldn't it be a great idea if there was this independent centre that we could go to, test the latest and greatest technologies and find out what's best for our particular situation? And that was kind of the genius or the genesis of the AMRC idea. And as it happened, Boeing were trying to sell aircraft to the UK government at the time, so they had some tax credits that they were required to use in this country. That bought them the initial 10 years of their AMRC membership. And that could then be leveraged against other funding sources to get us up and running. And now we're at the stage where we've got more than 100 industrial companies working with us to advance their manufacturing technology, to help them to develop their supply chains and also to improve their workforce. So you could almost say that the AMRC is quite a good example of long-term industrial strategy, because that stability, that the membership investment, and more recently the money that we've got from the high-value manufacturing Catapult, has enabled that sustained investment in technology development here.
And the high-value manufacturing Catapult, just for the listeners' benefit, how does that fit in with the AMRC? What's that organisation?
Yeah, sure. So the Catapults, and there are 9 of them in total, were set up by the government more than 10 years ago to help to transition R&D and technology from the university environment into industry. So the AMRC is part of one of those, the high-value manufacturing Catapults, which investigates a whole range of different manufacturing technologies, from traditional metal cutting, which is where the AMRC started out, through composites, through automation, digital technologies, and then also into the process industries. So basically, all of the areas that the UK is strong in and has an interest in developing further in the future. And the money that the Catapult receives essentially helps the centres to build that baseline capability, so that when companies come to us and say, oh, we've got this particular manufacturing problem, then the Catapult has already got maybe 80-90% of the solution already in place, and we can then help to tune that understanding to solve a particular organisation's specific needs. But essentially, the facilities that we have and the knowledge that has been developed is available for the benefit of any organisation that works here in the UK or is working for the UK's interest. So it's essentially it's open to anyone that can help the UK to prosper.
And the AMRC feels like a model that could end up actually being employed more widely. As you were alluding to, there's a lot of conversations at the moment about how we can drive more productivity gains in the UK. So the AMRC feels like a model that could be replicated in other areas or other locations.
Oh, absolutely. And it's something that already has been. So we are one of the older centres within the high value manufacturing catapult. Several of the others are based on that basic model. They came about a little bit later, prior to the foundation of the high value manufacturing catapult. And then if you look at some of our major partners as well, so Rolls-Royce will describe their AXRC network, which investigates a whole range of different manufacturing processes, and they have AXRC centres all around the world. So obviously they have several in the UK. They also support centres in the US and Singapore, working in different areas in support of the different elements of the business. And then Boeing also utilise the same concepts. So they've got a variety of centres worldwide that utilise the same basic model that the AMRC was set up around. So absolutely, I think Keith and Adrian and John Baragwanath, who were the three founders of the AMRC, absolutely hit on a great model that's got a lot of value and has and is being used worldwide.
Great. So what is the University of Sheffield AMRC's major focus areas?
Well, I think, as you can imagine, we're focused on manufacturing technologies, and we have around 11 sort of core competency areas from machining to composites, additive manufacturing, design, castings, a whole variety of digital and sustainable technologies and techniques. And we apply those to solve real world manufacturing problems. And at the moment, I guess our key focus areas are aerospace, defence and energy, with a particular focus at the moment on new nuclear solutions. So things like small modular reactors and such like.
Yeah, and I saw on the website there's a big focus on how the AMRC can contribute to the UK's net zero goals. Is that a key part of the sort of nuclear side of things?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, there are obviously one of the things that nuclear can do is obviously reduce CO2 emissions. Now, obviously, there are other byproducts from the nuclear energy process that you have to think about as well. And the guys working in that area are also fairly heavily involved in thinking about, well, how do you store the waste products safely over time? But sustainability is a massive area now for many different companies, not just here in the UK, but worldwide. And it's really one of the three areas that we're often asked to look at, which obviously are productivity. So how can businesses make more in less time, or make what they're currently doing in less time? The connectivity side of things. So how can they utilize the data that's being connected or collected from their processes in a more efficient way and make money from that? And the sustainable angle. So how can they reduce their emissions? How can they increase the life cycle of their products? And how can they find value streams from those products when they get to the end of their life?
And leading on from the focus areas, because I know one of these is nuclear related. What's the most exciting innovations that the AMRC is involved in at the moment?
Well, I think there's probably three sort of big areas that are keeping us excited at the moment. So one of which is Compass, and Compass is our composites at speed and scale facility that's just being fitted out at the moment. That's there to help develop next generation composite aircraft components. So that will help those aircraft to be lighter, to use less fuel, and that will hopefully also lead to reducing their emissions. That's the building's now finished, and it's being fitted out with some absolutely fantastic new technology that will enable companies to investigate new techniques. Initial projects there are going to be with Boeing, but longer term that will be available for other companies to use as well. That could then feed into other sectors like offshore wind, and basically anyone that needs large scale. By large scale, I mean composite components that are 10 meters by 5 meters. So we're talking really large composite components. So that's one area of excitement and interest for us at the moment. Obviously, I mentioned small modular reactors. We've been doing a lot of work with Rolls-Royce and with other companies developing those over the last few years. So it's really exciting to see them get their preferential supplier status with the government to take that forward. And hopefully over the next couple of years, we'll start seeing those manufactured at scale so that we can plug some of the gaps in power supply around the UK when the wind isn't blowing. Although on days like today, there's quite a lot of wind blowing out there, so that's good. And then the other area is really around, well, how do we reduce the emissions from traditional industries like castings, like forgings, which historically have relied on natural gas for their heating products. And we've got quite an interesting project running with a startup company called Suiso. They're based here on the Advanced Manufacturing Park, and they're developing a novel solution which allows you to create hydrogen in a much more efficient way on site. And that removes some of the limitations associated with having to get large quantities of hydrogen to a location where it hasn't been set up to do that. Now, over time, we could probably do that with the existing gas network, but you always have that challenge associated with, well, at the moment it's set up for natural gas. You can't just switch over that, otherwise probably all of our home heating boilers will blow up because they aren't set up for hydrogen. But companies who want to adopt that earlier on need that solution, and Suiso are developing that. So it's exciting to work with companies like them who are just at the start of their journey and help them to develop their product and help industries to understand how that can be deployed in their own facilities.
Yeah, it's great to hear about all of the innovations around energy. That I've heard that with AI as well, there's going to be increased demands on electricity placed on, I guess, just generally as a result of that. Is that something that you've heard, and sort of is that part of the thinking behind these sorts of things like the small modular reactors and the other sort of ways of delivering more energy in a more green way?
Yeah, I think to a certain extent that's part of the challenge with digitalisation. So obviously every time you collect more data or use an AI tool to create insight from a process, you require a computer system to sit behind it. And those computers, whether they're high performance computers in the case of AI, or whether they're just a server that you're storing data on, requires a power supply. And really we need to make sure that those power supplies are coming from green sources. So as we go further down the route of connectivity and connecting more devices together, then we also need to make sure we're doing that in a sustainable way, so that we're not producing or increasing the emissions associated with those solutions. So that there's definitely some tension there that we need to be aware of and to think about, well, actually, what are the implications? And actually, one of the things that we can do there is think about, well, how much of this data do we actually need to store? What interval do we need to sample those data sources at? And that's something that the Factory Plus system that we've developed at the AMRC goes some way to address. So that's an open source solution which we developed in-house through one of the Catapult projects a few years back. And it actually works by exception. So most digital systems will essentially capture data at a standard interval. And that's fine if things are changing quite rapidly. Obviously, if you've got some data sources that change relatively slowly, so temperature, for example, in a factory environment is obviously quite important for validating that some processes are in spec, but it doesn't change very quickly. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to sample that data set every second, because you're going to be storing lots of the same data points. If you can set your system up so that it only stores data when something changes, you can still meet the validation requirements, but store far less data. And that type of thinking can have quite a significant effect on the sustainability of some of these new technologies as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And I think more generally, I guess lots of what the MRC is doing around energy in particular is I've heard that the UK is the sort of green technology and transition to net zero is one of the areas that we're really strong in, and it's also an area that has been growing quite quickly over the past year or so, where the growth in other sectors have been more sluggish. So it's a positive thing that we're sort of capitalizing in this area as a country.
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly gone long ways to ensure that we're generating a greater proportion of our energy from green sources, and I think offshore wind has really been the leader for that, and they've made great efforts to reduce the cost of that power. It's getting to the point though there where that's becoming more challenging, because one of the ways of doing that has been to increase the size of the turbines that are being installed. So to the point now where the latest turbines being installed have 120 meter blades, and then you get into all of the logistics about, well, how do you move those things around? How do you dock the vessels in ports? And there aren't actually that many ports now that you can dock a suitable vessel in that carries them out into the sea to be installed. And then you get into some of the other challenges associated with it as well. So we've now used up many of the easy to build in locations around the UK, the areas where you've got relatively shallow water, where you can use what's called a jack-up vessel, which sits on the seabed, lifts itself out of the water and provides a stable base to install the turbine. And we're now getting into locations where we have to start thinking about things like floating offshore wind, which are much more challenging. And you also have to think about, well, how do you maintain a floating offshore wind turbine? Over time, you're going to have to replace things. You're going to have to put people on them. And you get into some really interesting sort of human factors challenges. And then if you have to maintain the floating element of the turbine, at the moment, they tow them back to a fjord in Norway somewhere, which is great when you've got a small number, but you can't do that at scale. So really getting into the challenge of how do you do these things? Just because you can do them once doesn't mean that you can do it tens or thousands or hundreds of times. And that's another one of the challenges that we get asked to address at the AMRC, whether it's for wind turbines or cars or planes.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We talked about this when we were just prepping for the episode, but what's required to anchor innovation in a region?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, because historically we've been very good at developing new technology here in the UK, and we've got some world-leading universities that have developed great solutions, but not all of them have become embedded here. So there are three things that you need to do to anchor innovation in a given area. You need to develop, or you need to have a new technology solution that provides a financial benefit. But you also need a supply chain which is able to provide the right materials, the right equipment, and everything else a business needs to thrive in that area. And alongside that, you also need a workforce with the right skills and the right capabilities to be able to deploy that technology. And I think that's one of the things that we've actually been able to develop and to prove across the Advanced Manufacturing Park and the Sheffield Business Park here in the region. We've got that coalescence of organisations developing the technology, providing the raw materials, the cutting tools, the equipment, And we've also got the training providers developing the workforce to do that. And it's a concept that was described by a guy called Bruce Katz in a report he put out a few years back, describing something he referred to as an innovation district. And an innovation district brings those things together, but also brings it and has it sit alongside the housing required for the workforce and for the people to live in that area, and also all of the other pieces. And you'll see the Mayoral Combined Authority now and the region talking about the Sheffield Advanced Manufacturing Innovation District. And that idea is also being rolled out into other areas now as well, because it's been proven to provide real benefits and help to drive investment into the area as well. So obviously there are projects that we work on around the innovation district, but that kind of it's now acting as a hub to pull in investment for other organisations as well, building on the back of the last 20 or so years of investment into the area. So I think we're now starting to see those real benefits that came from the vision, essentially, to set up the park and the areas all that time ago.
Yeah, I've visited a couple of times the Advanced Manufacturing Park, and that whole area it's really cool seeing all of the sort of massive buildings, and there's like a big wind turbine sort of almost like on the premises, it feels like, or right in the area. And it's just, I don't know, it just feels like quite a different space, but it's also right in the city as well, or at least sort of within an urban area. So it feels quite unusual in that respect, in the sense that you've got this loads of industrial facilities right interconnected with housing and also, you know, close to the university and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's a really good story of renewal as well. So it's worth thinking about what the Advanced Manufacturing Park used to be. And 40 years ago, it was the Orgreave Colliery and coking works. After that closed in the 80s, it was an area of quite significant unemployment. I think at one stage it had the worst unemployment in the entire of Europe.
Wow.
in the area around where the AMP is now. So there was a lot of deprivation, and actually, if you were a young person at that time, there weren't that many job opportunities in the area. So to see how it's turned around, and the fact that we're now able to provide good, high-paid, high-value jobs to young people in the area is really important, and they can go and work for companies that they've heard of. So the Boeings, the McLarens of the world, Rolls-Royces, earning good, high-paid, high-value jobs, which are really valuable for not just the region but the entire country. That's a great story, and I think it also we've been able to show through some of the activities that we've run that actually it's more than just an opportunity for the young lads that used to work in the coking works, would go do their apprenticeship, and we're now at the stage where we've got a really good mixture of all sorts of different people coming into those jobs. It's not just young boys that are being attracted into them. We've got a significant number of young women, and then also other people coming through from other sectors as well. So they maybe have taken some time out from their previous jobs and want to return to work later on. And the apprenticeships that are on offer these days can let them do that, converting from other areas or changing tack, essentially.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the challenge, I think, with young people entering the workforce is just knowing what's out there. I think if I think back to when I was starting out in my career, it's, you know, you finish studying or being at school and there's so many options, but you kind of don't know. I don't know. It feels like it's quite easy to overlook all of the different ways that people, you know, your skills can be relevant. So yeah, it's great that the Advanced Manufacturing Park and the AMRC is there to sort of provide one route and I guess be a very physical presence as well. So it's quite obvious if you're in that kind of area of Sheffield or Rotherham that it's there and there's this, you know, huge facility and you could be part of it?
Absolutely. I think we have a massive problem with legacy around manufacturing and engineering, and we're all influenced by our parents and our friends and family. And I think in the UK we've still got a big issue around the kind of legacy of what manufacturing and engineering was seen to be in the past, particularly in Sheffield. I mean, Sheffield's famous for the Full Monty, which was obviously a film based on unemployment in manufacturing in the Sheffield area. And it takes some time to change those perceptions. But obviously with locations like the AMP and other places in the area where there's a much more positive view on the opportunities that are available, hopefully we're starting to chip away at that and actually showing that if you've got an interest in problem solving, which is really what engineering and manufacturing is about, then there are some great opportunities to do that and to improve the environment and what's going on around you. And that's really why I got into engineering. I really got off on solving problems and being able to say, well, I've made that product or that process better. So it's developed far beyond the kind of the dirty, dangerous environment that manufacturing and engineering was in the past. And I think if you look at what Sheffield established itself on, really it was about deploying manufacturing at scale. So other people had developed many of the processes originally, but hadn't really got it working. And lots of the big organizations that have developed here have really prospered because they were able to take those original concepts, work through all of the challenges associated with scaling them up, and they've really benefited from that. And that enabled Sheffield to thrive in the past by being able to make a whole range of different things at scale in a way that other places around the world could never manage or couldn't manage at the time.
Yeah, and I guess looking ahead, obviously the UK government announced a new 10-year industrial strategy. I think that was in June, if my memory's right.
Yes.
Yeah, and I know that the AMRC is going to play a substantial role in implementing that. And I wondered if initially it'd be helpful just if you could provide a quick summary of what the UK's new 10-year industrial strategy is, just at a high level.
Yeah, sure. I think, first of all, it's really important that we've now got an industrial strategy again. There's been a number of years since we had one in place, and really having a plan for how we're going to progress things as a nation is really important. You look around the world, there are a number of examples of how other countries have done that. And I think the approach that the government taken is, it's not without its challenges, but actually having a clear focus and a variety of activities that can be rallied around is important. And the approach that they've taken is to identify a number of key sectors, advanced manufacturing being one of them, and thinking about, well, what are the things that needs to be changed to ensure that we can adopt and thrive in each of those areas. So I think it's very important that that's happened. I think obviously the devil's always in the detail, and seeing how it gets adopted over the next few years is going to be key. But having that focus on implementation rather than purely the development of technology, which is perhaps one of the criticisms of previous government policies in this area, is important. I think it's also important that they've clearly articulated that enhancing skills and accelerating access to talent is important, because, as I alluded to earlier, you can't anchor innovation in an area without the workforce being there already. And I think perhaps my one only criticism of it would be that perhaps they could have made more emphasis on the supply chain side of things. There was lots of focus on the barriers to companies exploiting technology, but those tended to focus on the business side of things as well, rather than the interactions between the businesses. So it's important that they highlighted the challenge around the cost of energy, and hopefully we'll see that addressed over the coming months. It was important that they focused on access to finance, and that's definitely a challenge that many businesses face, particularly if they're located outside of London. So it's significantly easier to get access to finance if you're in or around London. There have been some initiatives in the region more recently, and hopefully they'll continue to grow. I think the Merrill Combined Authority are working in this area to try and provide a whole range of different opportunities for businesses in the area to get access to finance, and that'll help them to grow as well. So I think they were the important things that work across the entire country. I think it was also quite important as well that I think they described it as being unashamedly place-based as well. So place is really important, thinking about where are the right places to locate certain industries. Obviously, we talked earlier on about offshore wind, but offshore wind is a sector that we can't really interact with that strongly in South Yorkshire because of our distance from the sea. So thinking about how can we play into that? Well, we can supply some of the raw materials. Offshore wind relies on steels and metals, like many industries. We can definitely provide that, but it's unlikely we're going to be able to build a factory to build 120-meter wind turbine blades here in the region because of the logistics involved. So thinking about, well, where can each region play its part? Which industries is it ideally focused to support? I think is going to be key. And I think really fundamentally, if nothing else, the value that the industrial strategy brings and the structure it gives is really about pulling all of those things together, giving a focus that people can get behind and all pull in their direction. So I think that's really going to be the strength that we see over time. We've now got something that we can all sit behind and work towards. And obviously the AMRC will hopefully play its role in supporting the areas that fit within our competencies.
And you mentioned the point about it being unashamedly place-based. So for South Yorkshire, what are the sort of perhaps we've covered quite a lot of this up to this point in the episode, but what is seen as being the areas that South Yorkshire can contribute most to in the industrial strategy?
Well, I think if you look at what they refer to as the Industrial Strategy 8, which are the key sectors that they've identified, first and foremost of those was advanced manufacturing. So that's an area, obviously, that South Yorkshire has a long history of supporting, both in terms of the end products, but also the raw materials that go into those as well. Seeing a little bit later down the list, you've also got the defence sector, and we've seen a lot of announcements recently around Forge Masters and BAE Systems bringing and setting up new facilities in the region as well. And obviously they're doing that because of the strength and the skills of the workforce that already exist, and hoping to build on top of that. And then you can also look at some of the other areas as well. So clean energy, we've got companies like ITM Power who have chosen to base themselves in the region. Suiso, as a startup, chosen to locate themselves here. And then moving into transportation, you've got companies like Magmatics and others located here as well. So we won't necessarily be supporting all of those 8 key sectors here in South Yorkshire, but I think there's a definite place and there's a definite fit for the region, providing key technologies, key products, and companies that provide those to be based here as well. And then we'll have to think about, well, how do we call on the other areas that we need to make those work? So financial services, how do we ensure that we've got the right level of investment coming here? And the professional and business services that support those as well. How do we encourage organisations that provide those as a service to locate themselves here as well.
Yeah, no, it's great that there is this, as you say, that there's this plan that's been put in place, and that South Yorkshire and the AMRC are very well positioned to sort of support and also, I guess, benefit from this, from the fact there is this clear plan and I guess investment that goes with it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think I should point out it's not just us doing this on our own. We're just part of this ecosystem that exists here, and I think really we're quite lucky to have found the right place at the right time for the AMRC to thrive. We wouldn't have done that unless there were a whole variety of other things that sit around us, and actually being quite fortunate with local government as well. If you look at the Mayoral Combined Authority, they definitely recognise the value that manufacturing and engineering brings to the region. And they've got a variety of initiatives. If you talk to Oliver Coppard, he's passionate about the skills agenda and ensuring that we've got the right skills and the right workforce in the region, because he recognises that it's really important to anchor those businesses here. I think they recognise that the finance side of things. So they're trying to pull all of those levers to ensure that businesses do get stuck here. And I think we're also lucky with our location as well. I mean, it was one of the things that brought me to South Yorkshire, I guess, nearly 30 years ago now. I think it's a great place to live as well. So if you bring all of those things together, you're much more likely to get companies to stick. And I think if you look back through history, companies tend to anchor themselves in places where those things occur, and they have all of those in the same place. And I think the one interesting example to that is actually Microsoft. Microsoft as an organisation perhaps shouldn't have started in Seattle. So Bill Gates and the other people that set up Microsoft went to university in California. They perhaps should have set up Microsoft in California, where they had that workforce in place to enable them to grow. What they did have going for them, though, was the fact that Seattle, like Sheffield, is quite an outdoorsy city. There's a lot of interesting things going on around it, and they were able to encourage enough of their peers to come and join them. And if you look at Seattle now, lots of companies want to move to Seattle because of the ecosystem that occurs. So there's an element of luck to a certain extent that they managed to find the right place at the right time, which has enabled that ecosystem to grow in that location. I think we're now at the stage, or we're well beyond the stage where we've got that in Sheffield, and hopefully we can use that to encourage other businesses to come and share in the growth that we've got here and make it even better.
Great. Well, that's a great note to wrap up on, I think, unless there's any further points that you had left to cover, Pete.
I think we've covered all of the main points, haven't we? Yeah.
No, it's really, really interesting. And I guess it just makes me really enthusiastic about the future, I guess, hearing all of these initiatives that the AMRC is supporting, and I guess also hearing about all of the different great things that are going on in South Yorkshire, but also in Sheffield and Rotherham, in terms of the Advanced Manufacturing Innovation District. Is that the right way to talk? Yeah, and then also there's also the Sheffield Innovation Spine, and there's just feels like there's lots of good progressive things going on. So it's very makes you feel very enthused. And if people want to keep in touch with you or the AMRC, what's the best way for people to do that?
Well, if they want to get in touch with the AMRC, then if they go via inquiries at amrc.co.uk, that'll put them in touch with the team here. And obviously, like many people, I'm on LinkedIn. So if people want to find me on LinkedIn and reach out to get in touch, then more than happy to do that.
Great. Yeah, and the website of the AMRC is amrc.co.uk, I think, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah. Nice and simple.
Yeah. No, it's great. Cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on. Been really interesting and really appreciate your time.
Thank you for inviting me, Richard, and make sure we stay in touch.